Good afternoon to all the viewers. Most of the whom I hope are patients who are listening in. This is the 11th of our Ask Gunshila series. It's basically a patient educational program. And today we will be discussing about fibroids, which are very common. And though we will be concentrating on infertility and fibroids, we will have a little bit of conversation about fibroids in general too, which affect women of all ages. And this basically today we would be concentrating on infertility. I'm Dr. Jyoti Menon, the Director of Infertility Services at Kudashila Hospital, and with me I have Dr. Padma, who is a senior consultant in reproductive medicine. So, Dr. Padma, I would like to start by just asking you. You can also text in your questions anytime during the program, or also write in to at askgunashila.com. And I'd like to start by asking Dr. Padma, what exactly are fibroids and how important are they and should we really pay attention to them? When do they become important for treatment in infertile patients?
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Dr.
Yeah.
Jyoti. So, fibroids are benign, which means non cancerous tumors which arise from the uterus. They are very common tumors and they are seen most commonly during the reproductive years. If you see out of 100 women, 30 to 40% will have fibroids, which means every 3 to 4 women out of 10 will have fibroids on their routine examination or when we perform ultrasound for other reasons. So these are pretty common tumors, but nothing to worry about them. These are benign, they are not cancerous tumors, and they mostly seen during the reproductive years.
Yeah, and like Dr. Padma said, if we just routinely on an ultrasound, many of us get to see small fibroids in the uterus on scans during a routine scan for some other reason. And I don't think anybody should rush and go and do something about it just because you see. So when does actually the and this picture also shows that there are different kinds of fibroids.
Yes.
In various locations of the uterus.
Mm.
You can have something which is projecting outside the uterus,
Yes.
or it can be growing inside the uterine lining. And these are different kinds of fibroids. And over the course of this talk, we will be telling you which of these are really most important and have to be dealt with in infertility.
Yes. So, before moving on to the fibroids and their location and which needs our attention and which can be ignored, let us first briefly discuss about the anatomy of the uterus and the functions of the uterus. Okay. So when we discuss about anatomy, the uterus, it's a pear-shaped organ and it consists of a body, that is the upper part, and the cervix, which is the lower part. So the body of the uterus mainly consists of myometrium and the inner layer of the myometrium, which is called as endometrium. And the endometrium is hormonally sensitive, and every month it prepares itself for the implantation of the embryo. And if the embryo does not come, then it sheds itself and the women will have her menstrual cycle. The cervix is the lower part of the uterus and it connects the body of the uterus to the vagina. When we talk about non-pregnant uterus, the size is approximately the size of a clenched fist. Okay. So when the woman develops fibroids, the uterus size starts increasing. We expect normally the uterus size to increase only during pregnancy. So if a non-pregnant uterus on examination, if we find the size has increased, then most commonly we will suspect fibroids.
And basically, like Dr. Padma said, these fibroids grow in the muscular layer of the uterus.
In the muscular
Basically,
layer.
they grow in the muscular layer, and the muscular layer is all over the uterus.
Yes.
So you can have it in the lower part, what you call the cervix. You can have it in the middle part, or you can have it in the upper part, which is the fundus.
Yes.
And why is particularly in certain areas very important for reproduction? That fibroids being there are going to impact reproduction. Is there a reason why we want to do that?
Yes. So this is when we talk about fibroids and their location, the more common location which can affect the pregnancy and reproduction is those fibroids which are jetting into the cavity of the uterus. So if they are distorting the cavity of the uterus, which means they're jetting into the cavity of the uterus, they can interfere with the movement of the sperm, they can interfere with the movement of the egg or the embryo, and they can even interfere with the implantation of the embryo. So
Yeah, the
these
second picture on the screen actually shows what happens in normal fertilization.
normal
Can you just
fertilization. So in the normal fertilization, when the egg releases, the tube picks it up, and the egg is in the tube and it awaits for the sperm to come. So once the fertilization happens, the embryo grows within the tube for 3 to 5 days, and then it comes back to the endometrial cavity and it implants in the endometrium.
So that's why fibroids in particular
In
reasons,
particular reasons,
like
which
especially
are
the cervix
cervix
or very close to the tube,
Very
they
cl-
can
yes.
interfere with this normal natural fertilization.
fertilization. Yes.
Okay, so suppose we say, okay, now what exactly happens? Why do all fibroids don't grow, or do
Yes.
they grow?
So first, these fibroids arise from a single smooth muscle cell within the myometrium. Okay, the myometrium is made up of muscle tissue. Most commonly, it's a smooth muscle. So it arises from genetic changes within a single cell, and the cell multiplies itself and it becomes a tumor, which is called as fibroid. In our medical terminology, we call it as a myoma or a leiomyoma. So what causes or what predisposes to the development of this fibroid, it is not known, but the evidence says it is most commonly because of genetic and hormonal factors. So when we talk about hormonal factors, the most common hormones which are produced by the ovary during the reproductive years, that is estrogen and progesterone, are the ones which primarily cause growth of this fibroid. So once the woman reaches menopause, that is once she stops having her periods at around 45-50 years, these fibroids either shrink in size or they do not grow, they remain the same size. So this indicates that these fibroids are hormone dependent ones.
Yeah, so the basically at menopause, if after you attain menopause, you suddenly see a fibroid growing,
Yes.
then you should be suspicious. That means when there really is no production of estrogen and progesterone, which is what normally happens after the menopause, if it does, then there is some again a reprocessing of
Yes.
this grow of these hormones, and we need to look into that.
We need to look into it, and the patient will require further evaluation to see if the fibroid has undergone any malignant change. As I said, these are benign tumors.
Yeah, so the only time when we really get worried about them basically is postmenopausal if they
Yes.
grow in size.
Grow in size.
So again, if you have a look at this thing, where exactly are the fibroids? We were already discussing it, that it can be anywhere over the basically any part of the muscular layer of the
Yes.
uterus, but there are like definite definitions which we have of the different sizes.
So as I said, the myometrium forms the major bulk of the uterine wall. So the myometrium consists of an outer layer, a middle layer, and an inner layer which is close to the endometrial cavity. So if the fibroid is seen growing in the outer layer of the myometrium, which is the most common one, it is called as a subserosal fibroid, and it accounts for 55% of the fibroids that we commonly see. So if the fibroid is seen within the myometrial wall, it is called an intramural fibroid, and this is 40% common. And if we see a fibroid which is projecting into the cavity of the uterus, it is called as a submucosal fibroid. And these are the fibroids which are of concern for me because I am primarily treating infertility patients. So I'm more worried about a fibroid which is projecting into the cavity of the uterus. So they are called as submucosal fibroids. Sometimes the fibroids can be connected to the uterus with a stalk. In such case, we call them as pedunculated fibroids.
Then you can also have some fibroids which go from the uterus into the sides.
Into the sides
Okay,
also.
Which is called a broad ligament
Broad
fibroid.
ligament fibroid.
And among the lot which you have now listed, the subserosal fibroids are usually not really interfering with infertility. Basically.
Yes, they're not interfering
The
with
most one which interferes really with infertility is the submucosal.
submucosal.
And plenty, even if you have, does the size matter? Does the number matter?
Yes, the size definitely matters. Even if it is not projecting into the cavity, if we see a single large fibroid which is more than 5 centimeters, and if the woman is having recurrent pregnancy loss, or if she does not, on evaluation, if there is no other cause for infertility and that's the only thing that we see, then obviously I will attribute that the cause of her infertility is because of the fibroid, especially if it's a large fibroid.
Also, if there are small intramural fibroids, because they are occupying so much of the myometrium by the fibroids itself, the blood supply to the uterine lining gets affected.
Yes.
So even if there are many small intramural fibroids, in a case of repeated pregnancy loss, and we find no other cause like you
Yes.
said, then maybe we should consider doing myomectomy for that
For
patient.
those fibroids, yes.
Okay, so then if we go, what are the common symptoms these patients present with, and generally also, and infertility also?
So as I said, just the presence of fibroid does not mean that every woman will have symptoms. Most of the fibroids are asymptomatic, means they do not produce any symptoms. And few fibroids produce symptoms, and the most common one being painful periods or heavy flow during periods. They can have problems with fertility, uh, and there are pressure symptoms. See, the uterus anteriorly has bladder and posteriorly it has rectum. So if the fibroid is large, it will exert, and it is anterior, it will exert pressure on the bladder, in which case the women will have increased frequency of passing urine and urgency to pass urine. And if the fibroid is large and it is lateral, it can press on the ureters and it can cause renal damage. If the fibroid is posterior, it can press on the rectum, and the women can have constipation or painful bowel movements.
So it all depends both on the size
And
on the location.
Location, yes.
So the pressure symptoms depend on that. Fine. Any other these things which happen with fibroids other than really menorrhagia and pain? Very painful
Yes,
periods.
very painful periods.
Yeah. So those are the things which basically we can attribute the symptoms to fibroids as per se. But like Dr. Padma started in the beginning of the program and told you, it is not necessary that they even produce symptoms. Again,
Yes.
it depends on the size and the position.
Yes.
The closer they are to the uterine lining, the more the patient seem to be having bleeding.
And
as
the
well
number
as,
also.
Yeah, and the number and the size. So can can the fibroid, we've already discussed this very briefly, we can tell how does it affect fertility?
When a woman, those women coming to our clinic for infertility issues, when we evaluate them, the incidence of fibroids is only 5 to 10% in these women.
So
However,
you really don't have to do. If you
yes.
just see a fibroid first without doing any other test in these infertility women,
We don't
and the
have
size, depending again, size
Yes.
and location, you don't have to rush and do some kind of
Yes,
this things.
definitely.
Yeah.
We will evaluate them for other causes of infertility as well. When all the other causes are ruled out and it's just the fibroid which is present mainly in the uterine cavity, then I will give more importance to that fibroid. And that incidence of those women having symptomatic fibroids and being infertile is just 1 to 2%.
Yeah. Now, how even this we've sort of spoken, but you can enumerate again exactly how fibroids cause infertility.
Yes, as I said, the fibroids can cause infertility only if they're interfering with the movement of the sperm, movement of the egg, or the embryo, or the implantation of the embryo. So, movement of the sperm is primarily by the cervical fibroids. If the fibroids are present at the mouth of the uterus and they are distorting the shape of the cervix, then they will interfere with the movement of the sperm. And if the fibroid is present near to the tube, it will alter the tube and the ovary relationship, and it will prevent the tube from picking up the egg when the egg is released. Or it can even exert pressure on the fallopian tube and block the fallopian tube, in which case neither the egg nor the embryo will reach the uterus. And the third thing is, if there are large fibroids, then it can interfere with the blood flow to the endometrium. And if there is a fibroid which is projecting into the uterine cavity, it can act as a foreign body and it will prevent the implantation of the embryo. So these are the most common causes how it causes infertility in these women.
And like we already discussed before, even regardless of the size, plenty of small fibroids in the uterine lining or uterine myometrium, that is the muscular layer, can also, because they interfere with the blood supply basically to the uterine
Yes.
lining, they can also be a cause of infertility.
And they also cause certain chemical changes within the uterus which can affect the implantation of the embryo.
Okay, so again going in to this thing, this is just some studies which have been done.
Yes, this
But they
is
told us-
statistics. So what are the chances of pregnancy in a woman who has a fibroid? Those who do not have fibroids, the chances of pregnancy in their natural cycle is around 25%. And if a woman has fibroid, then it decreases to 11%. And suppose this woman undergoes myomectomy and then tries for a pregnancy, then her chances of pregnancy is increased by 44%. And as I said, the most common fibroids which can interfere with the pregnancy are submucosal fibroid and an intramural fibroid.
Again, the size is important.
Again, the size is important. And these fibroids can also interfere with the results of our in vitro fertilization. As I said, it is not like if the fibroid is present, the women will not get pregnant. They will get pregnant, but the chances are less.
Yeah, so suppose initially when they come and we do an IVF cycle and we find out that according to us, everything was normal, there were good quality embryos, the transfer was fantastic.
Yes.
Even then she didn't conceive, but she's got these fibroids. Maybe after ruling out all other causes, we would suggest that removal may increase her chances.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So once we do that and once they become pregnant, is there a problem in a pregnancy with a fibroid? Do you really have to remove all fibroids? What is the cause?
Yes, as I said, pregnancy with a fibroid, again the incidence is around 2 to 10%. So in this picture, I've showed a fetus along with a fibroid. Okay. So if the fibroid usually grows, if it grows during pregnancy, it grows in the first 12 weeks of pregnancy. And this fibroid can exert pressure symptoms and it can increase chances of miscarriage in these women, or it will increase the risk of preterm labor in these women. Again, as I said, these fibroids, if the woman undergoes a myomectomy, then the chances of miscarriage is reduced by 50%. And if the fibroids are present in the lower part of the uterus, or if they are large fibroids, then they can interfere with the position of the baby, in which case the head can be up and the bottom can be down, or they can interfere with the opening
Route of delivery.
opening of the uterus, thereby increasing the chances of cesarean delivery, operative delivery.
And also sometimes if there are large fibroids, especially in the fundus, which is coming closer to the uterine cavity, the placenta can go and get implanted there
Yes.
also. All these are problems.
And they
So-
can also undergo degenerative changes and cause severe pain during pregnancy.
Which really, that is why as such as the treatment for that is just conservative, in the
Yes.
sense we give them painkillers and all that. But if you have a large fibroid, before you try for pregnancy, it is suggested, depending on the size and the location, it is better be removed.
Yes, and especially if they're having miscarriages.
Yes. So can fibroids become cancerous? I think we've already discussed this.
Yes.
Postmenopausal is one time.
Yes, they can become cancerous. And if they become cancerous, then we name it as leiomyosarcoma. And the incidence is 1 in 1,000, means 1 in 1,000 patients can have a fibroid turning into malignancy. And it is more common after menopause. And usually hysterectomy is the only recommended treatment for leiomyosarcoma.
Then how do you diagnose the uterine fibroids?
As I said, fibroids are present in many women and they're only diagnosed when they come for routine checkups, for health checkups, or checkup for any other complaints. So usually they're diagnosed during examination, a pelvic examination. So as I said, the non-pregnant uterus is the size of a clenched fist. So when we do a pelvic examination, when I feel that the uterus is increased in size, then I will suspect a fibroid. And if it is,
depending on, again, if it's really large, you can feel the fibroids separately.
I can feel the fibroids also. So in order to confirm my diagnosis, I will ask for an ultrasonography. So ultrasonography helps in diagnosis 1, and it also helps in locating where the fibroid is, and it also helps in giving me how many fibroids are present. Okay, so most of the times the patient will require a transabdominal and a transvaginal ultrasonography. To know more about fibroids which are projecting into the cavity, sometimes we will do a sonohystogram. In sonohystogram, what happens is we will put a small catheter into the uterus and distend the uterus with fluid and then perform a transvaginal ultrasonography. Here, it gives more idea about the fibroids which are projecting into the cavity of the uterus. And we have more confirmatory diagnostic tests such as diagnostic hysteroscopy. So in diagnostic hysteroscope, a lighted telescope is introduced through the vagina into the uterine cavity, and the uterus is distended with fluid. And since we are using the telescope, it helps in giving a better image, a magnified image of the uterine cavity, and it also helps in us diagnosing the number of fibroids, the size of the fibroids, and also helps in diagnosing the extent of blood supply that the fibroid has, and we can also plan for the surgery.
Yeah, this is like a visual
Yes, visual.
confirmation. And those pictures, would you like to say about
Yeah,
those
those
pictures?
pictures
Those are
are showing,
hysteroscopic pictures,
it's a
actually.
hysteroscopic picture, and it is showing a submucosal fibroid. You can also see the blood vessels branching all around the fibroid. And advanced investigations such as MRI and CT scan are only required when there are deep fibroids, and when there is a difficulty in imaging with ultrasonography, and when we suspect a malignant change in these fibroids. Only in such cases we will ask for advanced imaging technologies such as MRI or a CT scan.
So most of the time, by an examination, by an ultrasound,
Sound,
if required, hysteroscopy,
hysteroscopy.
and if at all required, MRI. These are the basic things we would like to do
Yes.
in order to diagnose the number and size and location. What is the treatment? Do you have to really give treatment? Who do you
So,
decide to give treatment?
Yes, as I said, most of the fibroids, majority of them are asymptomatic, which means they will not require any treatment. So the only thing that they require is a follow-up. So every 6 months or 1 year, these women will have to come for regular checkups and an ultrasonography.
So just a counseling and tell them don't worry,
Counseling and
especially if they are it's in the location which we think it's not too big a size, then we can just tell them we'll follow it up.
yes.
Hmm.
And few patients who are symptomatic, who have heavy flow during menstruation, or who have severe pain during menstruation, or who have pressure symptoms, or if they are infertile, then we'll have to look into the options such as medical and surgical management. If the woman is planning for pregnancy, then the treatment that I would advise would be myomectomy. Because medical line of management, we use drugs such as GnRH analogs. So when we use GnRH analogs, one, they are temporary treatment, and they only help you to buy time when you're planning for surgery, or for correction of anemia before you plan the patient for a surgery. And these GnRH analogs mainly act by decreasing the ovarian hormone production. So the hormones are suppressed. So the woman cannot plan for pregnancy when she is on GnRH analogs. And the second thing, since the hormones are severely suppressed, these women will develop postmenopausal symptoms such as hot flushes, vaginal dryness, and mood swings. So due to which they cannot be used for extensive period as well.
And they also cause bone loss.
Yes,
so that's another extra
another
thing we have
extra
to
thing.
be worried about.
Yes.
So basically, this drug is temporary. Before
Temporary.
you plan to do maybe surgery, or after surgery, before
Yes.
they come for IVF.
Yes.
So otherwise, this is not the treatment for fibroids.
Yes. And also, once you stop the treatment,
All
be
comes
it any drug, be it GnRH analogs, or there are other drugs such as mifepristone, when you use all these, once we stop these medications, the fibroid grows back to its original size in 3 to 6 months.
And what about surgery? Surgery can be done in certain
Yes,
cases.
surgery is the treatment of choice if a woman is planning for pregnancy, and that to myomectomy. So the route of myomectomy again depends on where the fibroid is located. If the fibroid is located in the cavity, then the route would be hysteroscopic approach. If the fibroid is located in the wall of the uterus, then we can approach it through laparotomy, that is the traditional method, or laparoscopy, or a robotic assisted surgery.
So when we mean open myomectomy, that's what we mean by a laparotomy. We open and then do the myomectomy. Okay, so I think we've discussed this. Just very briefly, the hysteroscopy, we've already discussed this.
With a hysteroscope, we can usually most easily approach the fibroids which are projecting into the cavity. So hysteroscope is nothing but a lighted telescope. It's a very thin scope which is inserted through the vagina into the uterine cavity. At the same time, the uterus is distended with fluid so that we can visualize the cavity very clearly. And the operating instrument is introduced to the outer sheath of the hysteroscope, and we can scrape out, it is shown in the second picture, and we can scrape out the fibroid. So usually it requires
so again, the route of the surgical option depends on the size and the location.
Size and the location.
Hmm.
If the majority of the fibroid is present in the cavity, then it requires a single setting. And if majority of the fibroid is in the myometrium, then it might require 1 or 2 settings. And it's a very simple procedure. The patient can be discharged the very next day, and they can get back to their routine work in a day or two. And there are very rare complications which can occur with this procedure, such as extensive scarring, intrauterine adhesions, or bleeding, which, as I said, are rare.
So the next one is a
Yeah.
laparoscopic
The next
approach.
one is a laparoscopic approach. Laparoscopy is usually used when there are large fibroids which are intramural, or when there is a large fibroid which is subserosal and which is having some pressure symptoms. Then laparoscopic myomectomy is the approach of our choice.
I think most of the viewers know that laparoscopy is
Yes.
the keyhole surgery.
It's a keyhole surgery. Here, again, a lighted telescope is introduced through your belly button or your umbilicus, through a small incision made around your umbilicus. And the operating instruments or the surgical instruments are inserted through the lateral incisions. These are 1 centimeter or 0.5 centimeter incisions that we make on the lateral part of the abdomen, which is shown in the picture. And using those instruments, we will remove the myoma and then close the uterine opening. So again, this surgery is a keyhole surgery. The patient can be discharged in a day or two, and they will completely recover in 1 week, and they can get back to their routine work. And there are very rare complications even with this surgery, such as extensive adhesion formation. Usually, we take certain precautions after myomectomy, such as we apply Interseed or some gel-like in order to
Okay.
prevent adhesion formation.
So
But-
depending on the surgical options, what is the problem with doing surgery?
Yes, the main problem with doing myomectomy is it leaves a scar behind the scar in the uterus. Okay, so when there is a scar, it is a weaker tissue. So when the woman conceives, her chances of going in for an operative delivery is increased because we don't want her to have a rupture.
So especially if we have opened the uterine lining when we've
Yes.
done what is called a submucosal fibroid, something which is projecting into the uterine cavity,
Yes,
or a very large fibroid at the top of the uterus, which is called the fundus. So all these are potentially weak points.
Weak
so
points.
these patients have to be very closely monitored in pregnancy.
yes.
Okay, now once we do a myomectomy, can they start trying the next day? Anyway, the myoma is gone.
No, the uterus needs time to heal, and as I said, it forms a scar tissue, so it needs time for it to heal completely and for the complete union of the scar tissues. So it usually takes 3 to 6 months for us to give the patient a green signal to go ahead and try for pregnancy. And also, the healing time depends on the approach, how we have approached the myoma. If it is a hysteroscopic myomectomy, it heals faster. If it is a laparotomy or a laparoscopic myomectomy, it takes a little longer time.
So it all depends again, size and location,
Size and location.
method of managing surgically.
Yes.
And will these fibroids come back, or once we remove, it's removed forever?
We have only removed the fibroid. We have not removed the factors which have produced the fibroid or caused the fibroid. So one, the genetics, we cannot change the genetics of the women, and the hormone production by the ovary. As I said, these are seen in the reproductive years. So the woman will continue to produce her hormones. So the fibroids can come back, and the incidence is around 30% over 10 years. And it is more common in those women who have multiple fibroids and not a single large fibroid.
So mostly if you have a single large fibroid and you undergo the myomectomy, your chances of recurrence are much less. Then though if you've had multiple fibroids which have been removed, you still have a chance of getting it back.
Yes.
Because the basic cause is still
still
unknown
persistent.
and it's persisting. Okay, I think we have come to the end of our session on fibroids and infertility. Do we have any questions? Okay, you can text in your questions either during the program or afterwards at Ask Gunshila if you still have any doubts. And our next program would be done by Dr. Archika Naik and Dr. Vasant Kumar, and they'll be speaking about role of bariatry in infertile women and whether losing weight in these infertile bariatry itself will help in these infertile women, just bariatry, which results in weight loss, especially in one particular group of women who have polycystic ovary. We have had studies which have shown us, and we've done quite a few cases,
Yes.
which show us that just weight loss in these infertile or highly obese infertile women will help in pregnancy.
Not just in women, but also in men.
Yeah, so it does, and we will have it on next Saturday at 1 o'clock. Thank you very much for watching us.
Thank you.
Thank you.